tell us a little bit about how you got into bikepacking, because my understanding is that you just did something super gnarly for your first time. But it seems like with your history, you're uniquely positioned to be able to do that without really, killing yourself like most of us would. So yeah,
Yeah.
tell us about your first experience bike rafting.
I had seen pack rafts when we were living in Hokitika. Nathan Fave had brought, must have been real early in alpaca days, a pack raft over where he was looking to incorporate into his adventure racing, but I'd never paddled one. And so when Damien suggested this, I was all over it because it just involved combining bikes and boats. And I wanted to do more, so I added another river to the route that he was planning. And both of those rivers are grade or class 3. So we did one practice session on a flooded Buller River before that, before we rode into a wilderness river and literally put on in the middle of a class 3 rapid, bike strapped on, and that was the first time, really.
And how was that for you?
It was great. It was fine, like that, because of the so much anticipation and wonder of how the boats were going to react with the bikes on. I guess I was expecting it to be very difficult, but as you know, Lizzie, once you strap a bike to a boat and push off from shore, it gets real natural after that. It doesn't feel as clumsy as it looks.
Hello, my name is Lizzie Scully, and I'm the co-owner of Four Corners Guides and the co-author of the Bike Raft Guide with Steve Fastbinder, aka Doom. We run a multi-sport adventure guide service based out of the very small town of Mancos, Colorado, home of Alpaca Raft, the Mancos Brewing Company, and many other incredible small businesses. We live about a half hour outside of town at Skullbinder Ranch, our 35-acre base camp on the border of Mesa Verde National Park, and the Ute Mountain Ute Tribal Park. Late last year, we started this podcast, A Beginner's Guide to Pack Rafting and Bike Rafting, to bring you another learning channel for these activities. In this podcast, we'll share helpful informational interviews with experienced athletes, guides, and others in the community, along with how-to episodes and storytelling. If you have any requests or questions, ping us at fourcornersguides@gmail.com or comment on our social platforms. Starting today and through the fall, we'll be sharing stories, podcasts, videos, and photos focusing on international pack rafting adventures. February 2025, we're heading over to New Zealand to partner with Hugh Miles of Pack Rafting Queenstown and Deane Parker of Deane Parker Adventure Channel on a specially curated adventure of that country's finest rivers. So for episode number 8, we are chatting with Deane Parker of Deane Parker Adventure Channel. Deane is one of the most renowned bike rafters in the world. He does very difficult whitewater trips on pack rafts with bicycles, and he's just a joy to talk to. So we hope you enjoy this next episode of A Beginner's Guide to Pack Rafting and Bike Rafting.
So, Deane, I have known you for many years, and I have interviewed you extensively for the Bike Raft Guide and other things. And because those interviews are so garbled, I wanted to revisit some of the questions and some of your history, because you are one of the most experienced whitewater bike rafters in the world, probably the most. You've done the most exciting and dangerous, dare I say, and remote adventures, and you have a unique place to do those things in being a Kiwi from New Zealand. So I wanted to revisit a bit about your history and background and how it set the stage for your current bike rafting endeavors, as well as your guiding and bike raft awareness building efforts. But let's start with your history. Can you tell me just about your history with rafting in general?
Okay, I left school and trained to be a fitness instructor in my early 20s. And when I was working as a fitness instructor, an old family friend who was a raft guide hit me up about coming on a couple of rafting trips, and I instantly got hooked. And maybe within a few weeks of doing river trips, I was guiding, which was, this was in the mid 90s. So it was, there were no qualifications or anything in New Zealand back then. So I just did a few trips and boom, I was a guide, mainly guiding inflatable kayaks back then. But that did that for a season, and then I decided I wanted to do this as a career. So I did an adventure tourism 6-month course and got a river rescue qualification and a first aid qualification, and came across Don Allardyce, who was the owner of Ultimate Descents in New Zealand, and he offered me a job, and I embarked on a 7-year rafting career in Murchison, and during that time I became a partner in that business. And that business was unique because we did multi-day heli rafting trips on the West Coast. So we would fly in by helicopter because there were no road access, and then raft out, either 1 to 3 day trips.
Is that common in New Zealand?
It was at that time because we had a massive fleet of secondhand cheap helicopters and for deer recovery. And in the 60s and 70s, we used helicopters to recover wild deer. And so this was kind of like the helicopter tourism boom was at the end of that deer culling phase in New Zealand. And we were flying into rivers for like 60 to 80 bucks into these remote, pristine rivers. And yeah, so we built a rafting business around that. Incredibly dangerous, using helicopters to fly around and to do rafting. Had many close calls and had a helicopter crash, and which was, I almost died 3 times in the space of a few minutes. Put me off heli rafting a little bit. But yeah, that was 7 years in Murchison on the Buller River, and then Melissa and I, my wife and I, set up a rafting business in Hokitika on the West Coast, and that was where I basically discovered pack rafting. Before pack rafting, we were walking inflatable kayaks into the Hokitika Gorge with clients, which is a stunning river, beautiful azure blue water, jungle, rainforest surrounds. 2-hour walk in with 18-kilogram inflatable kayaks. It was so painful. It's probably why I've got such a bad back now. But yeah, that was a stunning location to run an adventure tourism business. But it was, yeah, rafting on the West Coast had a boom period, and when I was there was like 5 or 6 rafting companies operating, and nowadays there's 1 part-time rafting company because tourism just got very diluted with adventure activities. New Zealand innovated its way into all sorts of different products, including on rivers. You know, there were river bugs and river sleds and river boarding, and so the rafting kind of became less popular because people were trying the next thing. And of course, one of those next things was pack rafting. But in the meantime, I left the rafting industry and embarked on a farming career, my wife's family farm in Canterbury here. But during that time, I was always adventuring, mainly bike packing. And then an opportunity came about.
Wait, I have some other questions I want to ask you, so I can sort of like so that you just don't talk the whole time, because it's so I want
Do
to.
it.
Yeah.
Got me.
I want to know what you liked about rafting, like what it was that was appealing about rafting.
I grew up in a family of hikers and bikers, and I'd always, even from when I was in my late teens, I'd been a mountain biker, so I love the outdoors. So opportunity to go and be paid to work in the outdoors and to show people the pristine rivers that we have in the South Island of New Zealand was an amazing opportunity. And yeah, the connections I made during that time, just like any raft guide will attest to, formed friendships that is, still very strong today. And yeah, so I mean, I loved rafting, opportunity to take a group of people on a river and see them, enjoy and be fascinated by, the hydraulics and how a river ebbs and swirls, and being able to talk to them about nature, and it was a great time. And unfortunately, just like most other raft guides can talk to, it didn't pay that well. So I think that was probably the main reason why, we moved on to farming.
So now your history with riding bikes. So you started out as a mountain biker when you were a kid. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty
How,
much.
how young were you?
First time I rode a mountain bike would have been like 16, so not young, real young.
Did you race?
But they were pretty new in New Zealand then. That was like late 80s, late 80s.
Okay.
And then I got into road cycling for a bit, shaved my legs for a while, as you do. But yeah, I've always, and then I've like during my rafting career, I broke a leg 3 times. So biking has always been we all know biking, if you break a leg or biking is such an awesome way to build fitness without having the impact of running or walking. So biking just helped me recover from many injuries. Yeah.
You broke your leg rafting? What did you fall out of the raft?
Oh, there's lots of stories there. Compound fracture of my kneecap whitewater rafting on the Buller, and then another time I took a fall bouldering on a river, on a sheer wall on a river bank, fell about 4 meters and smashed my heel. And then when we were living in Hokitika, I swam on the Styx River. And it was a crazy situation actually, because I was whitewater kayaking and I went upside down and a stick went through my spray skirt into the cockpit of my boat and it held me there, pinned me there. So I pulled Johnny and got out. But then I swam over this drop and just glanced my leg over a rock and broke my leg. I had to walk out from that. That was a bit of an epic.
So you also were kayaking at the same time that you were whitewater rafting?
Yeah.
So tell me just a little bit more. Were you like boating class 5 at the time?
Yeah.
Okay, so you were crazy.
Yeah, and all of our all of our class 4 and 5 whitewater rafting trips all had safety kayakers. So if I wasn't rafting, I was safety kayaking. And we had a small team of guides and safety kayakers, like 3 or 4 of us.
So this is interesting. So now I'm going to jump back to biking. So you were a mountain biker. When did you get into the cross country component of cycling, like multi days out and whatnot?
So pretty much after I didn't really ride bikes during my commercial rafting career, only really to recover from the broken legs. But after we started farming, that was my outlet, was mountain biking. So my very good friend Mule and I just basically started pushing the limits of doing hard backcountry riding. And that obviously was when bike packing was becoming more common or trending. And so, we did lots of, pretty decent 5 to 10 day backcountry rides.
So it seems like your hardcore adventures, I mean, naturally led to your ability to dive straight into bike rafting, really without trying something easy first. Tell us a little bit about how you got into bike rafting, because my understanding is that you just did something super gnarly for your first time. But it seems like with your history, you're uniquely positioned to be able to do that without really, killing yourself like most of us would. So yeah,
Yeah.
tell us about your first experience bike rafting.
I hadn't done any boating for several years. And then a mountain biking friend suggested that we strap our bikes to these little boats and go down the Clarence River on the east coast to climb and ride off an unridden mountain called Cone. And I had seen pack rafts when we were living in Hokitika. Nathan Favre had brought, must have been real early in alpaca days, a pack raft over where he was looking to incorporate into his adventure racing, but I'd never paddled one. And so when Damien suggested this, I was all over it, because it just involved combining bikes and boats. And I wanted to do more, so I added another river to the route that he was planning. And both of those rivers are grade or class 3. So we did one practice session on a flooded Buller River before that, before we rode into a wilderness river and literally put on in the middle of a class 3 rapid, bike strapped on, and that was the first time, really.
And how was that for you?
It was great. It was fine, like because of the so much anticipation and wonder of how the boats were going to react with the bikes on. I guess I was expecting it to be very difficult. But as you know, Lizzie, once you strap a bike to a boat and push off from shore, it gets real natural after that. It doesn't feel as clumsy as it looks, you know. On the Y Owl, it was pretty much continuous grade 3 for about, maybe several kilometers. We didn't have a swim, we didn't flip, we were being super careful. We were so buzzing after that because, we'd been anticipating what it was going to be like for months before that. So we were pretty stoked. And then we rode out of that river and over into the Clarence River and met our cameraman and photographer. And then they went bike rafting, and they were both very inexperienced, basically very little boating. And they went bike rafting on the Clarence, portaged the grade 3 sections, or we paddled their boat through the grade 3 while they walked around and shot that. Yeah, but we ran out of time to because I added another river to Damien's route, we ran out of time to do the Dylan Cone thing. So that sat there for several years, as you know.
How many trips have you done altogether now since I met you? Because wasn't it maybe, when was it that we met through Alpaca? Was it like 7 years ago, 8 years ago?
I reckon that would have been like 2017.
Okay, yeah, so about 7 years ago. And that's when you contacted me when I was at the marketing person at Alpaca. That's the first time you had gone bike rafting or bike rafting. Okay.
And pack rafting.
And pack rafting.
Yeah.
So can you tell me, I guess, a little bit more about what inspired you to like continue to push it and do bigger and more badass adventures, besides the fact that you, of course, wanted to do Dylan Cone and finish that adventure out, but like what inspired you?
Well, there was a film made from that trip, but that was made by Simon Waterhouse, who's a professional filmmaker, and he did a great job making that film, which was called Whitewater Odyssey, and well, not viral, but it went around the place, and obviously it was quite unique because it was showed bike rafting in a challenging environment, in class 3, and that's when I picked up a camera. Like I'd always been into cameras, but never anything professional, just, well, in my rafting days, we used to take a camera and sell the photos to the clients, and I studied photography at school. So I'd always had a background in photography and cameras. But after that first bike rafting trip, I decided that I wanted to film more adventures just because I was inspired by the feedback that we got from that trip. It was kind of a little bit addictive when you get that sort of accolades for something that you've done. Yeah, I picked up a camera and started a YouTube channel, and not really very focused on the social media side of things. I knew that I wanted, the experience I had at New Zealand Mountain Film Festival with the Whitewater Odyssey was cool, so cool. Film festivals, coolest experience for, inspiring filmmaker to experience, your work being seen on a big screen. So my adventure filmmaking is made for film festival audiences. So yeah, and after that trip, Mule and I were so keen to find something more challenging. I don't know why, but anyway, we so for the next couple of years, we just played around with smaller trips, getting more experience, what it felt like to paddle whitewater with a bike on a pack raft. We, I guess, recruited Rose Green as a team member and showed her the ropes with bike rafting, and she had a little bit of experience with whitewater kayaking. She had a very steep learning curve because basically before we did the Fluid Trails film, she had only really been bike rafting maybe a couple of weekends, and then on the Fluid Trails trip, which was our next evolution, we did a almost 600k loop that was over 200 kilometers of single track and 3 class 3 rivers to loop it. And that was what Mil and I decided was going to be because we got so much good mountain biking with a pack raft strapped to our handlebars. And I was actually on a rigid fat bike as well, which was pretty challenging. But yeah, that was an awesome trip. And I filmed most of that myself, which was the first time that I'd really made a film and edited it. Did the rounds of the film festival circuit. And yeah, even back then, 2 years after the first bike rafting trip, I seriously could count on one hand the amount of times I've been on a pack raft without a bike. Every time I got on a pack raft, it was bike rafting. It was quite unique to get on a unloaded pack raft and paddle it. And I still really, I mean, even now, I still really enjoy pack rafting Whitewater because of probably that introduction to pack rafting being so cumbersome, with the bike.
So do you actually get out and pack raft a lot now when you have time, when you're not working?
Yeah, it's in the last few years, biking has become less of a motivator and pack rafting has become more of a motivator.
I've kind of seen that with a few different people, including my husband, Steve. I mean, he still bikes a lot, but well, not so much actually the past few years. Like he just did this trip to the Northwest Territories and he just boated, and a lot of his trips are just boating now. So what's going on?
My joints are getting older again, so the biking's not so. I don't know. I've done a long brevet style ride, and New Zealand's a small country. I've done a lot of the cool backcountry riding multiple times. My kids are 10, 14, and 16, so when I ride a bike now, it's predominantly, get them out there. And so, yeah, but biking just doesn't motivate me as much anymore. But, to be completely honest, Lizzie, it's just as much about now that I make film professionally, I'm inspired by the brands that support me. And the pack rafting commercial community support me and I support them. And I'm driven by inspiration, and that comes even from the businesses that I work with. And I don't make a venture film for the money. I make it because I'm passionate about it. So any business that can appreciate that and will support me, then I will support them 100% back. And obviously that's been Alpaca Raft for me. And for 7 years, they've supported everything that I've put in front of them. And to be honest with you, pretty much Aquabound paddles have as well.
So it seems to me that you have three passions in life besides family and your farm, but that's biking and pack rafting and filmmaking, and all three of those things you've sort of melded your life together to make all three of those things happen in a really beautiful way. Curious if you have a sense of satisfaction more so than you had when you were younger, or have things changed with the way you feel about your life because all of this has come together so nicely. You're nodding.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because, my main bread and butter is farming, and that's the other, I guess, string to my bow. And I've melded my filmmaking into that, and I've got an amazing job where I capture some of the most innovative farmers in New Zealand and be able to tell their stories as well. And in the same time, in an amazing synergy, I get to bring that innovation back to our own farm and incorporate that in our own farm system, which has been like some sort of crazy symbiotic universal thing that I was not a passionate farmer before I found filmmaking. And the filmmaking has allowed me to do that, to become more passionate about our land and soil and animals and people. And yeah, so wear multiple hats. I don't know how I managed to fit it all in and balance it all. Sometimes I don't, sometimes I do. I would never give up my venture filmmaking for anything because that's what I'm most passionate about. That is my hobby now, I guess. But yeah, it's an amazing synergy. And pack crafting, and now that I'm involved more in the community of the pack crafting, with both the Pack Rafting Association of New Zealand and being invited to sit on the safety committee for APA has been just cool, because I really want to build awareness about pack rafting, because in New Zealand it's still seen as an inflatable toy, and people are still getting themselves into trouble with them because there's not the education there. So
actually, I have a specific question about, we've talked about your history and your past, and then now my question was, what inspires you to start teaching other people and to make these educational videos? And you just partly answered that, but that was where I was going next. So good segue.
yeah, I mean, there were two drownings in New Zealand real close together a couple of years ago, one on a lake and one on a river. Really stupid drownings. And that's where it was, for me, I realised that whilst New Zealanders had a really good reputation for being whitewater kayakers, some of the best in the world, this wasn't getting transferred to pack rafting community. The pack rafting community was mainly getting made up with hikers, fishermen, hunters, and the geography of New Zealand is deep, boulder-strewn creeks and rivers. And if you go into the headwaters, they're near on continuous. So a hunter that has no experience with whitewater thinking that they can take a pack raft and float a deer out on a creek on the west coast, which pretty much most of them are class 4 and 5, blows my mind. And that's pretty much where I started trawling the pack rafting New Zealand Facebook pages to make sure that I could have a voice to warn people, because it was crazy what people were doing. So that's why I wanted to, that's why I got into prans, and why I have plans to produce safety and awareness videos both for prans and APA, because I think that's probably the best thing I can do to educate people. Is just, as I say, bring those skills and pack rafting and filmmaking and educate people.
Can you talk to me a bit about how your students have reacted to learning to bike raft? Because it's so unusual. So I'm curious what you think it does to enrich or change their lives.
Yeah, so maybe 2 years ago, Hugh Miles and I collaborated to run a pack rafting course, and then subsequently, I think I've run 2 workshops for prans bike rafting, or maybe 3. So it's crazy, Lizzie. It's crazy. People have no idea what to expect, before they go bike rafting. And it's so clumsy, it's so awkward, it's so difficult to take a bike to pieces on the bank, a rocky river bank, and imagine that you're going to be able to strap that to a boat and then still, paddle efficiently or effectively. And so the look of concern on people's face while you're assisting them load the bike to the boat, to the smile they get, a few minutes after they're floating, to realize, hey, I'm not putting my life at risk by doing this. It's cool. It's great to see that. The people, I don't think in the, I don't know, 50 people or so that have been bike rafting with me, I don't think anyone's had an off-putting experience. I think it's all primarily positive. I think people are going away thinking about how they can plan routes to include bike rafting. So yeah, it's cool. It's amazing to have seen the uptake of bike rafting in that 7 years that I've been involved in it.
It's still pretty niche though, wouldn't you say?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And it's not for everyone. And, I think New Zealand's not even necessarily the right landscape for bike rafting, because, we don't have long distances to cover. I just imagine the limitless possibilities in North America and Canada and Alaska. And, I can sense that if you had a fat bike and a pack raft, you could go anywhere. And I mean, that's the beauty of bike rafting, is you literally can traverse pretty much any landscape.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you a few nitty-gritty questions about bike rafting, and we've talked about this a few times because so many people are so fascinated with whitewater, and I just want to reiterate by having a conversation about it, the dangers of bike rafting with minimal experience in whitewater, and that people watch what you do and they're like, oh my God, that looks so cool and so amazing, but you happen to have decades of experience. So talk to me about the dangers of bike rafting in whitewater, especially for, people who are new to the sport.
Rocky rivers, I think that's the limiting factor for me in pushing the limits of bike rafting, is danger that you could place yourself into in a small rock strewn stream. I mean, primarily to an expensive mountain bike, just like ripping your derailleur off or something, or puncturing the pack raft. But in, the worst possible scenario would be, getting pinned against your bike, or for example. So there are some very real risks that need to be thought about when you're planning a route. And especially in New Zealand landscape, we don't have a lot of big volume rivers. So yeah, I mean, that's primarily what, of people have suggested a bike rafting river. And if I've known the characteristic, it's pretty easy to say no if you know that it's going to include scraping your bike off boulders and squeezing through narrow gaps. So primarily I'm trying to find something that's got more width, more room. I mean, the other real risk with bike crafting is, like the self-rescue is more difficult. And I think no one wants to flip a Packraft with their $5,000 mountain bike on it. But really, I guess if anyone wants to try bike crafting, that would be my advice, is to chuck an old bike on it, go down to your local pond or lake and play around with what it feels like when the boat's upside down with a bike on it, and what it's like to try and get back into it. Because obviously, rescuing is incredibly more complex once you've got an upside down boat with a bike trailing along underneath.
Yeah, and I imagine it's much harder I haven't been in this scenario, but much harder to actually help someone else if you have a bike on your boat, because it's harder to navigate, especially if you're in the middle of a class 3 rapid. Like, can I help someone in the middle of a class 3 rapid? Probably. Yeah, I think I'm good enough of a pack rafter, but with a bike on my boat, nah, not a chance. So
And there's very few people that could, Lizzie, and that's why class 3 for bike rafting is by far and above the class 5 of bike rafting. It would be next to impossible to just help someone in the middle of a rapid, grade 3, class 3 rapid, when you're bike rafting. On the Fluid Trails film, Rose fell out and we captured it pretty well. And it was the first time that we'd done an assisted rescue. I've never practiced it. It's real life. And with actually, when you look at the footage, it's quite impressive how efficient it was. But yeah, same thing, that comes back down to a team of 3, 2, Mill's just as experienced raft guide as, kayaker as what I am. So we've got decades of experience. So I don't think that the average person should be aspiring towards whitewater bike rafting.
at least class 3, because class 2 and class 1 are pretty, at least around here, they're
For sure. Build it up. Progress. Start on flat water. Move to moving water. Get a feel for it.
Would you potentially share that footage with me? I'd love to see it and share it.
Absolutely. Of Rose? Yeah, for sure.
Well, who got the footage? You had the camera
That
people?
was GoPro.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'd love to see it. I mean, I remember seeing a little bit. I think you had some clips of it in one of your films, but I don't remember, like, seeing the whole thing would be really educational, I think.
Yeah, I should definitely pull that out of the archives. Good. That's good motivation.
That'd be awesome. So can you talk to me about so it is challenging to get into bike rafting. One reason it's probably still a pretty niche sport is because of all the different components, not just gear, but skills you need. Can you tell me about, like, from your perspective, the different kinds of gear you need and the different kinds of skills you need in bike rafting, pack rafting, and other skills that you might need? Like, what's the breadth of this to get into bike
Yeah,
rafting?
well, I mean, bike packing is a really essential skill, because you need to be able to, have basically an incredibly heavy touring load on a bike. So if you're not comfortable riding with a heavy load in difficult terrain, bike rafting is not going to be for you. So you need good bike packing skills. Obviously, if you're talking about whitewater, you need to have had some previous whitewater skills. The loading of the bike on the packraft, and conversely loading the packraft on the bike, is something that you want to have practiced. And as you know, making sure that you can paddle effectively with a bike, you've got a good range of movement when you paddle, is really essential. I think the other things, if you're doing multi-day trips, you have to be so good at ultra light, hiking or bike packing, because you can't take everything. You need to, the gear that you take needs double. The raincoat needs to be a paddle jacket, for example. If you try, I'm not too sure many people take dry suits bike rafting, but it's just something that I can imagine would be another cumbersome element that would not make the riding a lot less enjoyable. So for my kit for bike rafting, even in the cold, is a 1.5 millimeter neoprene pair of long pants and splash pants or over trousers over top of those, and then very warm either fleece or merino layers, and my raincoat. That way, that clothing can dual purpose. And logistics. I mean, if you are the sort of person who likes planning transitions. Maybe if you come from a adventure racing background, or you just like the challenge of jigsaw puzzles, bike crafting will be for you, because it is a bit of a jigsaw puzzle.
And interesting. So jigsaw puzzle, as far as putting the roots together, as far as putting the gear together, as far as like the transitions, like the whole package.
For sure, isn't it?
Yeah, I never thought about it that way, but yeah, totally. What are some of the most common questions people have asked you in your courses or in general at the films about bike rafting? Because I know, like with rock climbing, if you're doing big walls, people always ask, how do you shit off the wall?
Yeah.
So what are some of the
Yeah.
common bike rafting questions that you get?
A lot of people, I mean, if you're not a pack crafter, people cannot get over the idea that you can put your gear inside the boat. I mean, it seems so just normal for us if we're pack crafters, but for the general public, that doesn't really make sense. Everyone wants to know how often you puncture the boat with a bike. Everyone just assumes that because you've got sharp chain rings and cassettes and pedals that, the bike's going to be at big risk from puncturing. Have you ever had a bike puncture a pack craft in bike crafting?
I'm super lazy
No.
and I don't even take my pedals off. I just cover the bottom pedals off.
Yeah, so that's a pretty common question, and people can't understand how you can carry a boat on a bike. If you come across hikers on trail, they're like, well, "Where's your boat?" And because people just don't understand how compact and small you can get a pack craft, I guess. Those are pretty much the most common ones.
What about common questions from people who are learning or even people who have experience, but they're just trying to get better and they're looking to you for information?
A lot of people want advice and tips about how to tie the bike to the boat. A lot of people want advice, as what I was just talking before, is what we wear. People's, I guess the thing that's the most challenging for people when you get into the boat is the range of movement of paddling. There's I mean, I've never come across a loading technique where I've got full range of movement for paddling. You're always compromising a little bit. So that gets people a bit.
Thanks. So is there anything that I'm not asking you that you want to share with me about bike rafting New Zealand, pack rafting, or anything that we talked about today? Anything I'm missing?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, the potential, even in New Zealand, the potential for pack crafting still, there's still a lot of exploration to do. And, that's the cool thing about both bike rafting and pack crafting, is being able to look at the map with a different lens. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to going back to the West Coast and pack crafting some of the old haunts, albeit probably lower stretches and not the headwaters. Yeah, I mean, the West Coast or the South Islands really only seen a handful of pack crafters. So it's exciting. It's like it's adding another level of exploration to, adventuring. And that's, I guess, some of the appeal for a lot of people about adventuring, is the exploration factor. And I'm really positive about the pack rafting community going forward. It's an activity that draws quirky, individuals, and you've seen it in, the wide, diverse range of people that it appeals to. I
You,
love it.
you calling me weird?
Yeah. Not everyone's weird, and weird in a good way, for sure. A weird in that we're open-minded to new things. I mean, if you're not open-minded, you probably won't try pack crafting. You'll get in a plastic coffin and do a whitewater course and follow the sheep. But yeah, I think pack crafting is kind of stepping off that traditional path of river travel, and it appeals to people that are looking for something more unique, or a different way. I mean, I know even with Four Rivers, you guys really have come up with some unique routes to access places that are not seen by a lot of people. And that's what makes it so amazing, is that it just takes you to places that people can't go necessarily.
How about we give a shameless plug to the trip that you and Hugh Miles and Four Corners Guides are running next February?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a super exciting opportunity to go on a multi-day tour in New Zealand with a group of packcrafters, and especially the itinerary that Hugh's planned. The Shotover and the Landsborough rivers are pretty much two of the most iconic rivers in the South Island. So all going well, if a tour can capture both of those multi-day trips in an 11-day tour, you're going to get to see an amazing glimpse of the rivers of New Zealand, and both get to see that unique aspect of how we travel to rivers, with fixed wing or helicopter. We still have that ability to access remote rivers. And also, the Landsborough and the Shotover are quite uniquely different rivers, different natures. And, Hugh's an amazing operator, and he knows the Central Otago and southern West Coast area like the back of his hand. So I'm sure that he'll put on an amazing tour.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Well, I think that's all I've got. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me and playing phone tag for like the last 2 months. So thank
No
you.
worries.
Always thank you, Deane. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
Same, Lizzie.
Well, I hope that I get to go next year with you guys. The chances are slim, but if we can fill the course, then I'm going to go.
Yeah, well, I hope you both can come, because that would be super special to actually physically be able to give you both a hug and thank you for your support and collaboration over the years. So I hope that does happen.
Me too. All right, cool. We'll have a wonderful day on, or wait, is it winter there now? Are you not working on the farm?
Yeah, winter.
Okay. It's like 95 degrees here. I don't know what that is in what Celsius.
That must be like mid 30s, which is hot.
It's very, very, very hot.
Yeah, we never get mid 30s. I mean, in summer for us is, mid 20s is, or, maybe high 20s on occasional day.
Yeah, it's really hot. But luckily there's a river on the property, so I can just go dunk my head anytime.
Nice.
Well, have a wonderful day, and I will
Yeah, you too, Lizzie. Great talking with you.
you.
See you later.
Thanks so much for joining us for the Beginner's Guide to Packrafting and Bikerafting podcast. If you'd like to follow us, you can do so on Podbean or Spotify. You can also find the show notes on the fourcornersguides.com blog and on the podcast page. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please email us at fourcornersguides@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening.